The Grand Bellamy Hotel glowed like a jewel box against the Paris night sky. Chandeliers spilled golden light through tall windows, casting shadows across the cobblestone driveway. A black Mercedes sedan idled near the entrance, engine purring softly. Amara stood beside the passenger door, hands clasped professionally. Her driver's uniform was immaculate. Pressed white shirt, black slacks, polished shoes. The fabric felt crisp against her skin. She kept her expression neutral, eyes forward. The hotel doors burst open. A silver-haired man in a tailored charcoal suit emerged, phone pressed to his ear. Philippe Marchand moved like someone accustomed to others stepping aside. His Italian leather shoes clicked against stone. He stopped 3 feet from Amara. His gaze swept over her, cold and dismissive. He continued his phone conversation in rapid French, words sharp as broken glass. None, I'll handle it tomorrow. Right now I'm stuck with this situation. His eyes flicked toward Amara. They sent me a black woman as a driver. Can you believe it? Amara's fingers remained still against her slacks. Her heartbeat stayed steady. She had learned long ago that silence could be armor. Philippe ended his call. He addressed her in French, tone dripping with condescension. Do you even know how to drive this vehicle? Or did they just give you the uniform to look the part? She opened the rear passenger door. The interior light illuminated cream leather seats. She gestured toward the cabin with practiced grace. Probably doesn't understand a word I'm saying, Philippe muttered, sliding into the back seat. This is what happens when companies prioritize diversity over competence. Amara closed his door with controlled precision. Through the tinted window, she could see him settling into his seat, already dismissing her from his thoughts. Other hotel guests watched the interaction, some averting their eyes, others wearing thin smiles. She walked around the vehicle, spine straight. The night air carried the scent of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes. Amara Duchamp had been invisible for 18 months. Not literally, of course, but functionally. She had shed her designer suits and corner office, trading them for uniforms and steering wheels. Most people saw only what they expected to see. At 33, she possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that made venture capitalists nervous. Her father had taught her to read balance sheets before she could read chapter books. He had also taught her something more valuable: how people revealed their true nature when they believed no one important was watching. She worked for Premier Elite Transport, a luxury driving service catering to billionaires and diplomats. The job paid well enough, though money had never been her concern. What it offered was access. Hours spent observing the wealthy through a rearview mirror, invisible behind tinted glass and assumed incompetence. Her colleagues knew her as quiet, reliable Amara. The woman who arrived early never complained, spoke sparingly. They didn't know about the townhouse in the 8th arrondissement, the graduate degrees from HEC Paris and Oxford, or the investment portfolio that could fund a small nation's infrastructure. Tonight was supposed to be her last shift. Tomorrow she planned to return to her real life. But Philippe Marchand's arrival had changed something. His casual cruelty, delivered in French because he assumed she wouldn't understand, had ignited a different plan. She slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool against her back. Philippe was already scrolling through his phone, bathed in blue light. Airport, he said in English, the word clipped and impatient. Charles de Gaulle. I have a private terminal reservation. Amara adjusted the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, their eyes met in the reflection. She looked away first, playing her role perfectly. The Mercedes glided into traffic. Paris at night was a symphony of lights, storefronts, street lamps, the distant glow of the Eiffel Tower. She had grown up in this city, speaking French before English, navigating its arrondissements with her father's hand in hers. Her father, Amadou Duchamp, had arrived in Paris with nothing but ambition and a mechanical engineering degree. He had built Duchamp International Holdings from a single patent into a multinational empire. When he died 2 years ago, he left everything to his only daughter. The grief had been crushing. So had the pressure. Everyone expected her to step immediately into his shoes, to become the face of the company. Instead, she had appointed a trusted CEO and disappeared into ordinary life. She needed to understand something her father had never quite articulated: what happened when power was stripped away, when the armor of wealth and status vanished. Philippe's phone call broke the silence. He spoke in French again, voice rising with irritation. "The quarterly numbers are disastrous. I know, but the board doesn't understand market dynamics." He paused, listening. "Listen to me carefully. If we don't secure the investment by month's end, Marchand Luxury will have serious problems." Amara kept her eyes on the road. Her hands remained steady on the wheel. Traffic flowed smoothly toward the périphérique. "I'm not worried about due diligence," Philippe continued. "These investors are desperate for European luxury brands. They'll overlook minor issues." Another pause. "Yes, the debt-to-equity ratio is concerning, but we'll massage the presentation." He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. This conversation started in English but quickly shifted to French, the language he clearly considered private. "Marie, darling, I'll be in Geneva for 3 days. Yes, away from Céline." He laughed, the sound oily and self-satisfied. "What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Or my prenuptial agreement." The car approached the highway entrance. Amara signaled, merged smoothly into faster-moving traffic. The Mercedes accelerated effortlessly. Philippe leaned forward, his face appearing in the rearview mirror. He studied Amara with the expression of someone examining a curiosity. "You people are everywhere now, aren't they?" he said in French. 5 years ago I would have gotten a proper French driver. Someone who understands discretion, professionalism." He settled back into his seat. "Now they hire anyone. Diversity quotas, immigration policies destroying European standards. A BMW cut into their lane. Amara braked smoothly, maintaining safe distance. Her pulse remained calm. She had heard worse in boardrooms disguised as compliments, in investment pitches wrapped in concern about cultural fit. Philippe's phone rang again. He answered immediately, launching into an animated discussion about a real estate acquisition in Monaco. His French flowed rapidly, peppered with financial terminology and casual arrogance. "The seller is Lebanese, so expect aggressive negotiation tactics," he said. "These Middle Eastern businessmen think they're cleverer than they are. We'll offer 70% of asking price and watch him scramble." He laughed at something the other person said. "Exactly. You can't show weakness with these people. They mistake courtesy for surrender." The airport exit appeared ahead. Amara signaled early, changing lanes with practiced precision. Charles de Gaulle's terminals glittered in the distance, a complex of glass and steel. Philippe checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people earned annually. He addressed Amara directly for the first time since entering the vehicle. "You do know where the private terminal is, yes?" He spoke slowly in French, enunciating each word as if talking to a child. "Terminal 3, THREE. Can you find it, or do I need to give you directions?" Amara's fingers tightened briefly on the steering wheel, then relaxed. She maintained her silence, navigating toward the private aviation entrance with the confidence of someone who had used these facilities dozens of times. "Of course she doesn't respond," Philippe muttered. "Probably doesn't speak French at all. Just another immigrant taking jobs from qualified locals." The words settled in Amara's chest like stones. Not because they wounded. She had developed thick skin over years of boardroom battles, but because they crystallized something she had been observing throughout her 18-month experiment. People like Philippe existed in every stratum of wealth. They wore expensive suits and donated to charity galas, spoke eloquently about global markets and cultural exchange. Then, believing themselves unobserved, they revealed the rot underneath. She thought of her father. Amadou had faced similar prejudice throughout his career, though he rarely discussed it directly. Instead, he taught through parables and example. "Amara," he would say, "silent observation reveals more truth than confrontation ever will." but he had also taught her when to act. "There comes a moment," he once told her during a particularly brutal acquisition fight, "when silence becomes complicity. You'll recognize it. Trust yourself." This felt like that moment. The Mercedes glided past commercial terminals toward private aviation. Security gates appeared ahead, discreet and well-guarded. Amara had her access credentials ready. Premier Elite Transport held contracts with most private terminals. In the rearview mirror, she could see Philippe scrolling through emails, already forgetting her existence. To him, she was furniture, a function, not a person worthy of basic respect. Her phone rested in the center console cup holder, screen dark. One message waited, delivered 20 minutes ago from her CFO. "Marchand board meeting requested for tomorrow 9 a.m. Your presence suggested but not required. Decision point on acquisition timeline." Amara had been reviewing the Marchand Luxury Group file for 3 weeks. The company was hemorrhaging money, desperate for capital infusion, through a network of shell corporations and investment vehicles. Duchamp International Holdings had quietly acquired 51% of Marchand's debt instruments. Philippe Marchand didn't know that the investor he mentioned on the phone, the one he planned to manipulate with massaged presentations, was already his majority creditor. He didn't know that his company's survival depended on someone he had just insulted in 4 different ways. 25 years earlier, young Amara sat in her father's cramped office above an automotive repair shop in the 18th arrondissement. Hamadou hunched over technical drawings, speaking to her in a mixture of French and Wolof. "You see this design?" He pointed to a schematic of an engine component. "Everyone said it couldn't be manufactured cost-effectively. They dismissed me in meetings, called my ideas impractical." 8-year-old Amara traced the drawing with her finger. "But you proved them wrong." "Not by arguing," Amadou replied. "By building it. By letting results speak louder than their assumptions." He smiled, touching her braided hair. "Remember this, ma chérie. People will always underestimate you. Use that. Learn everything while they think you're learning nothing." That philosophy had guided Amadou's entire career. He never fought directly against the prejudice he faced. Instead, he outworked, outthought, and outlasted his detractors. Patent by patent, contract by contract, he built an empire while his competitors dismissed him as lucky or opportunistic. By the time Amara entered university, Duchamp International Holdings employed 3,000 people across 12 countries. Her father had become someone impossible to ignore. Yet even then, in boardrooms and investor meetings, she watched people initially address him with condescension, assuming his success was anomalous rather than earned. "Let them assume," Amadou told her during her first shareholder meeting. "Assumption creates openings. Someone who underestimates you has already made their first mistake." He insisted she learn the business from every angle. Summers spent in factories, winters analyzing supply chains. She studied mechanical engineering like her father, then added business degrees from the most elite institutions. She spoke 5 languages fluently, negotiated with manufacturers in Shenzhen and Mumbai, understood both balance sheets and production tolerances. When Amadou died suddenly at 62, the business world expected turmoil. A $24 billion company, inherited by a 31-year-old woman. Analysts published think pieces about succession crises and potential acquisitions. Instead, Amara quietly appointed Marcus Chen, her father's most trusted lieutenant, as CEO. She retained chairman authority, but stepped back from daily operations. The company stabilized, then thrived. Marcus knew Amara's mind, trusted her instincts, implemented her strategic vision without needing her physical presence. That freedom allowed Amara's experiment. She wanted to understand something her father had always known, but she had only intellectually grasped how the world treated people without visible power. The driving job had been perfect. Invisible labor, close proximity to wealth, endless opportunities to observe human nature unfiltered. For 18 months she had collected data points, the venture capitalist who screamed at her over a minor traffic delay, the CEO who casually discussed insider trading in the back seat, the philanthropist who refused to tip and complained about her accent. The security checkpoint appeared ahead. Amara slowed the Mercedes, window already descending. Cool night air entered the cabin, carrying jet fuel and possibility. A uniformed guard approached. "Bonsoir. Credentials, please." Amara handed over her driver identification and Philippe's flight documentation. The guard scanned both efficiently. His eyes flicked toward the rear passenger, then back to his screen. "Monsieur Marchand," the guard said in French, nodding respectfully. "Your departure is scheduled for 11:15. Bay 7. "Finally," Philippe muttered. "Some competence," the barrier lifted. Amara drove through, following illuminated signs toward private hangars. Sleek jets sat in orderly rows, their white fuselages gleaming under floodlights. This was where the truly wealthy traveled, insulated from security lines and middle-class proximity. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced briefly at the screen. Another message from Marcus. "Philippe Marchand personally called 3 board members tonight. He's panicking. Someone tipped him about tomorrow's meeting." "Your move." Amara's lips curved slightly. Philippe's earlier phone conversation suddenly made more sense. He knew something was wrong, felt the ground shifting beneath him, but didn't understand the mechanism. Classic panic behavior, calling everyone, trying to control narrative before understanding the crisis. She pulled the Mercedes to a smooth stop at Bay 7. A Gulfstream G650 waited, stairs deployed, cabin lights warm and inviting. 2 flight attendants stood ready near the aircraft entrance. Philippe gathered his briefcase and carry-on. He opened his own door without waiting, stepping onto the tarmac with the urgency of someone fleeing trouble. Amara exited the driver's seat, walking around to retrieve his larger luggage from the trunk. Philippe stood nearby, checking his phone with increasing agitation. "Finally," he breathed, reading something on his screen. Then his expression darkened. He looked up, seemed to notice Amara for the first time as a potential human rather than a function. "You," he said in French. "Did anyone approach you tonight? Ask questions about me? Try to give you messages?" Amara placed his suitcase on the ground. She met his eyes directly, expression perfectly neutral. Philippe's phone rang. He answered immediately, voice tight. "What do you mean, majority debt holder? Who exactly owns our paper?" He listened, face draining of color. "That's impossible. We would have been notified about consolidation." Amara closed the trunk with a precise click. She walked back toward the driver's door, movements unhurried. Behind her, Philippe's voice rose in pitch and volume. "Find out who owns Mercier Capital Ventures. No, not the public information, the real ownership structure. Someone is making a move, and I need to know who before tomorrow's meeting." She paused with her hand on the door handle. The moment crystallized. Philippe standing on a tarmac, shouting into a phone about corporate structures he didn't understand, while the woman he had casually insulted prepared to drive away in silence. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "You'll recognize the moment." This was it. Amara turned slowly, deliberately. Her movements carried none of the deference Philippe expected from service workers. She walked back toward him, each step measured and purposeful. "Monsieur Marchand," she said in flawless Parisian French, accent perfect and aristocratic. "I believe you had several questions for me this evening." Philippe froze mid-sentence, phone still pressed against his ear. His mouth opened slightly, words dying in his throat. "You said, and I'm quoting exactly, that I probably don't speak French at all." Amara's voice remained calm, almost conversational. "You also suggested I was hired due to diversity quotas rather than competence. Would you like me to continue?" The person on Philippe's phone was still talking. He lowered the device mechanically, ending the call without looking. His face had gone pale under the floodlights. "You understood," he stammered, switching to English instinctively. Every word, Amara replied, continuing in French. Your comments about my people being everywhere. Your theories about immigration destroying European standards. Your concerns about my ability to locate Terminal 3. She tilted her head slightly. Shall I translate all of this into English for your comfort, or continue in the language you used to insult me? Philippe's briefcase slipped from his fingers, landing on the tarmac with a dull thud. His expensive watch caught the light as his hand trembled. There's been a misunderstanding, he said quickly, voice rising. I wasn't referring to you specifically. I was speaking generally about industry trends. You called me this situation, Amara interrupted gently. You questioned whether I knew how to drive the vehicle. You expressed disbelief that your service sent you a black woman as a driver. Her eyes remained locked on his. And these statements were quite specific, monsieur. One of the flight attendants approached hesitantly. Monsieur Marchand? We're ready for departure whenever... Philippe waved her away sharply. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. This is a complete misunderstanding. My French is sometimes imprecise under stress. Your French was perfect, Amara said. As is mine. I studied at HEC Paris, actually. Before Oxford, my thesis focused on hostile acquisition strategies in luxury goods markets. She paused. Quite relevant to your current situation, wouldn't you say? The color drained further from Philippe's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Who are you? Amara smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. An excellent question. One you should have asked before assuming incompetence based on my appearance. Philippe's phone buzzed insistently in his hand. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted from confusion to horror. 3 missed calls from board members, 2 from his corporate attorney, 1 marked urgent from his CFO. The board meeting tomorrow, he whispered. You know about it. Amara pulled her own phone from her pocket. She opened her email, turned the screen toward him. The subject line glowed in the darkness. Emergency board session, Marchand Luxury Group, attendance required. Philippe squinted at the sender information. His lips moved silently as he read. Duchamp International Holdings. I suggest you don't miss that meeting, Amara said softly. 9 a.m. sharp. The boardroom on Rue de la Paix. She slipped her phone back into her pocket. I'll be there, of course. Though not as your driver. This isn't possible, Philippe breathed. Duchamp International doesn't have positions in luxury retail. I would know. We would have been notified. Mercier Capital Ventures, Amara said simply, which is owned by Duchamp Financial Services, which is a subsidiary of Duchamp International Holdings. Shell companies are useful tools, don't you think? You mentioned something similar on your phone call earlier, about massaging presentations for desperate investors. Philippe stumbled backward, catching himself against the Mercedes. His breathing came rapid and shallow. You can't. The board would never. The board answers to debt holders, Monsieur Marchand. Amara's voice remained perfectly level. And your company's debt structure is quite interesting. Consolidated over the past 6 months through strategic acquisitions. The majority holder now controls 51% of Marchand Luxury Group's financial obligations. The truth hit Philippe like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly. You own my company. I own your debt, Amara corrected, which, given your current cash flow situation, amounts to the same thing. She walked past him toward the driver's side door. Have a safe flight to Geneva, monsieur. I assume Marie is worth the trip. Philippe's phone rang again. He answered automatically, voice hollow. Yes, a pause. No, I understand. Tomorrow morning. I'll be there. He looked up at Amara, desperation replacing arrogance. Wait, please, we can discuss this reasonably. Whatever you want, compensation, apology, anything. Tomorrow, Amara said, opening the car door. 9 a.m., don't be late. A hotel valet appeared from the terminal building, walking quickly toward them. He was young, maybe 25, wearing the Grand Bellamy's distinctive burgundy uniform. When he saw Amara, his eyes widened with recognition. Mademoiselle Duchamp, he called out in French. They said you were working tonight, but I didn't believe... He stopped abruptly, noticing Philippe's stricken expression. Should I not have said... It's fine, Antoine, Amara replied warmly. Monsieur Marchand was just leaving. Philippe stared at the valet, then at Amara, comprehension finally complete. The pieces assembled into a picture he couldn't deny. Her perfect French, her knowledge of his company's structure, the valet's recognition, her complete lack of fear. You've been playing games, he whispered. Pretending to be a driver, setting traps. I've been working, Amara corrected. Learning how people behave when they think no one important is watching. You taught me quite a bit tonight, Monsieur Marchand. Thank you for the lesson. She slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life. Through the open window, she added one final line in French. By the way, your prenuptial agreement has a morality clause. Section 7, paragraph 3. You might want to review it before tomorrow. Philippe's hotel suite overlooked the Geneva lake, but he saw nothing beyond the window. He sat in darkness, phone clutched in both hands, watching his empire collapse in real time. 4 board members had resigned their support by midnight. His CFO sent a tersely worded email. We need to discuss your options before the meeting. His corporate attorney stopped answering calls entirely. He searched online with shaking fingers. Amara Duchamp. The results loaded slowly, each line another hammer blow. Forbes profile. Africa's youngest billionaire heiress steps back from public life. Le Monde article. Amadou Duchamp's daughter takes chairman role at 31. A photo from a technology summit 3 years ago. Amara in an emerald green suit, standing between 2 heads of state. The woman from tonight. Same face, different context. Power instead of invisibility. Philippe scrolled further. Business school awards, patent filings, philanthropic initiatives funding education across 3 continents. Her father's obituary mentioned her fluency in 5 languages, her degrees from Europe's elite institutions, her reputation as brilliant but intensely private. He had called her incompetent, questioned her intelligence, assumed she couldn't understand French. His phone buzzed. Céline calling for the 3rd time. He let it ring through to voicemail. What could he say? That he'd destroyed his company through casual racism directed at someone who literally controlled his financial survival. The morality clause. He pulled up his prenuptial agreement, fingers fumbling through digital pages. Section 7, paragraph 3. In the event of documented infidelity, all marital assets revert to Party A with no contestation period. Marie. The affair he'd mentioned in the car, thinking his driver couldn't understand. Amara had heard everything. She probably recorded it. One word to Céline's attorneys, and he'd lose his personal fortune on top of his company. Dawn broke over Geneva, grey and merciless. Philippe hadn't slept. His reflection in the window looked haggard, defeated. For the first time in his privileged life, he faced consequences he couldn't buy or negotiate his way out of. His father had built Marchand luxury from modest beginnings. 3 generations of careful growth, reputation, craftsmanship. Philippe had nearly destroyed it in 2 years of leveraged expansion and reckless decisions. Now a woman he'd insulted would decide whether the family name survived. The morning flight back to Paris felt eternal. Philippe sat in first-class untouched breakfast tray before him, rehearsing apologies that sounded hollow even in his mind. He remembered something his father once said. Shortly before dementia stole his clarity, "Our name means merchant. We serve, we don't rule. The moment you forget that, someone will remind you painfully." At Orly Airport, Philippe took a taxi to Rue de la Paix. The Marchand Luxury Group headquarters occupied a beautiful 19th-century building, all marble and gilt. He'd always felt pride entering these doors. Today they looked like a mausoleum entrance. The boardroom on the 4th floor was already occupied when he arrived at 8:45, 15 minutes early, a first in his career. Board members sat in clusters, speaking in low tones that ceased when he entered. His CFO, Jean-Baptiste, approached with grave expression. "Philippe, we need to talk before she arrives." "I know," Philippe said quietly. "I know what I did. Do you?" Jean-Baptiste's voice was hard, because the full security footage from last night was sent to every board member at 6 a.m. this morning. Not just your words in the car, the entire interaction. The valet recognizing her. Your face when you realized who she was. Philippe closed his eyes. Of course, Amara wouldn't rely on his honesty. She'd provide documentation, make denial impossible. "The vote is unanimous," Jean-Baptiste continued. "Either you resign voluntarily, or we remove you for cause." She gave us that choice. More mercy than you deserve. At 9 a.m. exactly, the boardroom doors opened. Amara entered, and the room shifted around her like iron filings responding to a magnet. She wore a royal blue suit, tailored perfectly, her natural hair styled in elegant twists. Diamond studs caught morning light from tall windows. She looked like what she was, someone born to command rooms like this. Marcus Chen followed her, carrying a leather portfolio. He took the seat to her right without ceremony. 3 attorneys filed in behind them, settling into chairs along the wall. Amara remained standing. She surveyed the room with calm authority, making eye contact with each board member. When her gaze reached Philippe, he felt himself shrink. "Good morning," she said in French, then switched to English. "Let's begin." Amara placed both hands on the mahogany table, leaning forward slightly. "For those who don't know me, I'm Amara Duchamp. Duchamp International Holdings currently controls 51% of this company's debt through subsidiary acquisitions completed over the past 6 months. A board member raised his hand tentatively. "Mademoiselle Duchamp, we weren't notified of ownership consolidation. Regulations require—" "We complied with all disclosure requirements," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "The documentation was filed appropriately with regulatory bodies. The acquisitions were structured through multiple entities to avoid market speculation. All legal." Amara straightened. "I'm not here to debate acquisition strategy. I'm here to discuss leadership." She pressed a button on the table's control panel. A screen descended from the ceiling. "Last night, Monsieur Marchand required transportation from the Grand Bellamy Hotel to Charles de Gaulle Airport. I provided that service." Her voice remained perfectly neutral. "During that drive, he made several assumptions about my capabilities based on my appearance. I'd like to share that interaction with you." The screen flickered to life. Security footage from the hotel driveway appeared, timestamp clearly visible. Philippe watched himself emerge from the building, watched the dismissive once-over he'd given Amara. Audio played through ceiling speakers. His voice filled the boardroom. "They sent me a black woman as a driver. Can you believe it?" 2 board members physically recoiled. A woman at the far end covered her mouth. The footage continued. Every insult, every assumption, every casual cruelty played out in high definition. Philippe's face on screen reflected exactly the arrogance Amara had accused him of. There was no misunderstanding, no cultural confusion, just naked prejudice. The video shifted to the airport. Philippe's panic when he started receiving calls, his stammered attempts at backtracking. The valet recognizing Amara. Philippe's final realization captured in perfect detail. Amara stopped the playback. Silence pressed against the boardroom walls like physical weight. "I spent 18 months working ordinary jobs," Amara said quietly, "learning how people treat those they perceive as beneath them. Last night confirmed what I suspected, that prejudice flourishes in assumed privacy. That power reveals character." She walked slowly around the table. "Monsieur Marchand, you're not a bad businessman. Your expansion strategy had merit, though execution was flawed. But your leadership creates toxic culture. You judge people by appearance rather than competence. You operate from assumption rather than curiosity." Philippe found his voice hoarse and broken. "I apologize completely, unreservedly. What I said was inexcusable. I'll resign immediately if that's what you require." Resignation isn't enough, Amara said. She stopped at his chair, looking down at him. Marchand Luxury Group employs 4,000 people across 12 countries. Their livelihoods depend on stable leadership. Your family built something meaningful over 3 generations. That legacy deserves better than performative apology. She returned to the head of the table. Here are my terms. You resign as CEO effective immediately. Jean-Baptiste assumes interim leadership while we conduct a proper search. You retain a board seat as non-voting observer for 2 years, learning what good leadership looks like. Philippe's hands trembled on the armrests. And my personal, your affair with Marie Blanchard remains private unless you contest these terms. Amara's expression hardened. But understand this clearly. I will not hesitate to share that information if you fight this transition. Your prenuptial agreement's morality clause is airtight. A board member spoke carefully. What's your vision for the company, Mademoiselle Duchamp? Integration with Duchamp International's supply chain, Amara replied. Access to manufacturing efficiencies, sustainable sourcing, expanded market reach. Marchand Luxury keeps its identity and independence. We provide infrastructure and capital. Within 3 years, I project return to profitability with improved margins. She paused, gaze sweeping the room. I also want comprehensive diversity initiatives. Not quotas, excellence. Recruiting from overlooked talent pools. Mentorship programs. Leadership training that addresses unconscious bias. Her eyes found Philippe. Because this isn't an isolated incident. It's a cultural problem. Jean-Baptiste cleared his throat. The board should vote. Agreed, Amara said. All in favor of Philippe Marchand's resignation as CEO, with terms as stated. 15 hands rose. Philippe's remained in his lap. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, Amara stood in her corner office overlooking the Seine. The view stretched toward Notre Dame, the river golden in afternoon light. Her father's photograph sat on the credenza, Amadou in his workshop, hands stained with grease, smile brilliant. Marchand Luxury's transformation exceeded projections. Jean-Baptiste proved excellent, implementing changes with precision. Employee satisfaction scores climbed. Her toxic element had been removed, and the organization breathed easier. Philippe attended board meetings monthly, silent and diminished. He'd sold his Geneva apartment, reconciled partially with Céline through expensive couples therapy. Rumor suggested he'd started volunteer work at an immigration support center. Whether genuine transformation or strategic rehabilitation remained unclear. Amara's driver uniform hung in a glass case in her office, beside her father's first patent filing. The juxtaposition amused visitors, though few understood its significance. Those 18 months had taught her what decades in boardrooms never could, that power was most honest when invisible, that truth emerged in unguarded moments. Her phone buzzed, Marcus calling. The Sorbonne confirmed, Your endowment fully funds the Amadou Duchamp Scholarship for immigrant entrepreneurs. First cohort starts next semester. 20 students from 14 countries. Perfect, Amara said softly. Her father would have loved that. Education as equalizer, opportunity as inheritance. She thought about that night at the airport sometimes. The moment she decided to speak, to shatter Philippe's assumptions with flawless French and undeniable power, it would have been easier to stay silent, to handle the acquisition through intermediaries to avoid confrontation. But silence, her father taught her, had strategic purpose. It wasn't surrender. It was observation, patience, perfect timing. And when the moment arrived, when speaking would teach a lesson that silence couldn't, you acted with precision. The premier elite transport uniform represented more than disguise. It symbolized choice. Amara could move through the world as billionaire or driver, chairman or observer. That fluidity was its own kind of power. Her father's voice echoed, Real power doesn't announce itself. She smiled, touching the photograph gently. But sometimes, Papa, it needs to remind people it exists. Evening settled over Paris, the city lighting up like a constellation. Amara stood at her window, reflecting on visibility and assumption, on the masks people wear and the truths they reveal. People showed their real nature when they believed no one important was watching. Philippe's cruelty had been casual, reflexive, born from years of unchallenged privilege. He hadn't invented his prejudice that night. He'd simply stopped performing the pretense of respect. Her father understood that dynamic intimately. He'd built his empire while being underestimated, dismissed, ignored. He'd transformed skepticism into advantage, doubt into fuel. When people expected less, he delivered more, and their surprise became his weapon. Amara had inherited more than wealth. She'd inherited strategy, patience, and the understanding that power exercised quietly often proved most effective. The 18 months as a driver weren't about judgment. They were about learning, about understanding the machinery of assumption and prejudice. But learning required action. Knowledge without application was just data. That night at the airport, she'd chosen to act, to transform observation into consequence. Philippe's lesson wasn't vengeance. It was education delivered with surgical precision. The Marchand luxury turnaround would succeed, not despite Philippe's removal, but because of it. Toxic leadership poisoned everything it touched. His departure created space for growth, for people previously overlooked to demonstrate capability. The company's renewal validated her father's philosophy. Excellence existed everywhere, waiting for someone to look past assumption. Amara thought about all the people working invisible jobs, possessing intelligence and capability that went unrecognized because others couldn't see past surface judgments. How many brilliant minds drove cars, cleaned offices, served coffee? Their potential dismissed because someone like Philippe decided they didn't look like success. Her father's voice, warm and steady. Amara, remember this. The person they underestimate today might be the one who changes everything tomorrow. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who's watching. Learning, preparing. She picked up her phone, composed a message to Premier Elite Transport. Thank you for 18 months of employment. Enclosed is an endowment to fund tuition assistance for drivers pursuing additional education. May we all have opportunities to show who we really are. Outside, Paris glowed eternal and beautiful. Inside, Amara felt the satisfaction of lessons taught and learned. Power was about more than wealth or control. It was about using advantages to create justice, to teach without cruelty, to build systems where excellence, not assumption, determined outcomes. Her father would have been proud. She hoped he knew, wherever he was, that his lessons had taken root and borne fruit. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice was perfect patience, and sometimes it was flawless French delivered at exactly the right moment. Judge people by their character, not their position. You never know when the person you underestimate might be the one who holds your future in their hands.